Do your child's tantrums go from 0 to 5,000 and you get no warning or notice that they're coming? My name's Jodie Thornton, and I'm going to talk today about how you can help your child through this phase of having those really explosive tantrums with no warning or build up to help you prevent them. So our number one thing is to really understand what would cause a tantrum to go from 0 to 5,000. So we can find that this happens when our children's, the difference between our children's emotional capacity and the stimulus that's taking up that emotional capacity, we can find that it happens more frequently when that window is much smaller. And so some of the things that cause that window to be much smaller are a substantial amount of change. So if you've moved house, changed daycares or schools, if you've had a family breakup or new partner come along, if you have had a death in the family, there's all sorts of reasons where we've had a significant change that's happened and your child is actually using up quite a lot of their emotional capacity just to adjust to the change. So that can be one reason. Another reason can be that they're going through a cognitive developmental stage. So between the ages of 1 and 1 and 6, we're going through these at the half birthday. So 1.5, 2.5, on and on until 5.5, and then the next one is at 7. And in those stages, this incredibly unscientific way to explain that the brain actually needs to make space for connections to the new brain matter that has grown, right? The new capacity that's happening inside of the brain. They need to make space for connections to happen between the old parts of the brain and the new parts of the brain. And so in order to do that, the connections between the old parts of the brain break, and so it's like all bets are off. And again, that's really unscientific. It's not structurally how it happens, but from a conceptual point of view, that's what your child is going through. And in those periods, it's basically like an internal shift. It's an internal change. And again, your child's emotional capacity is being taken up by adjusting to this internal shift. And so therefore, they don't have a lot left in the tank to actually cope with new things going wrong or new things being unresolved. And so then from there, if we think about what else might change, shrink that window where they don't have a lot of space to deal with emotional capacity. So one of the things that can happen is that they're just tired or hungry or cold or too hot. Anything that basically is sensorily not ideal, that can cause this to happen. So if we think about just before nap time, when they've woken up from a short nap, if they're just hungry, we're looking at those spaces. Now, then if we think about, there's some kids that just are wired to be quick to react. And when that happens, it's a personality style, right? This is something that they will always have about them, but they still can use ways to cope and strategies to deal with things so that they don't find themselves as reactive and getting as overwhelmed emotionally. That we want to really focus on for those kids. It's really important that they build the internal skills around emotional awareness and communication so that they can handle the way that they're wired in a way that helps them to really enjoy their life, right? So if we've got, these are the reasons that might be causing a tantrum to go from 0 to 5,000 with no notice. What are we going to do? So our first thing is actually to look for how can you insert preventative regulation into your day-to-day routine. And this is something that we want to make sure that you're not adding so much to your plate that actually it's causing more dysregulation because it's more stressful for you and for the kids to have so much to do. It's a fine balance between adding in some regulation and finding ways to do that in a way that doesn't actually increase dysregulation because we're all stressed about how much we have to do. Now, what would you do for preventative regulation? Things that help your child get into a meditative or flow state. Now, some kids really do meditate. I know it seems weird, but it does happen. And some kids don't. For the kids who will meditate, whether that's just focusing on their breath or a guided meditation, if they will do that, we want to add that into their routine as often as we can, whatever's realistic in your family. For a child who doesn't meditate, we're looking for activities that create that same sense of flow, that same sense of deep relaxation. That might be stretching, it might be snuggles on the couch, it might be going outside and getting fresh air and seeing like the expansive space can often make a big difference for some kids. For some kids, we can be looking at drawing or painting. We can be looking at anything that really gets your child into that relaxed state. Now, the second option we have, apart from meditative flow state, is actually getting the positive hormones to happen inside of us, which an easy way to do that is through laughter. So anything that makes your child laugh, if it's silly games, if it can even be screen time, if you're a parent that's okay with screen time, it can be anything that you can pop on the screen that will make them laugh. And I know that there's also some funny podcasts and YouTube audios that you can get that are hilarious for certain kids, but anything that can make them really laugh. Laughter creates a certain type of relaxation in the body, and that's really, really useful for us in this space. So if we've got that in place, you've looked at that preventative regulation, that helps in two ways. One is it increases the size of that window, so we'll have fewer tantrums, and when they do happen, they'll be less intense. Now, it's all relative, so quite honestly, some people might still classify the tantrums as extreme because that's, the less intense doesn't take a measurable edge off of the intensity of the tantrums, but it will still make a difference. So we do want to do those things as much as we can. Then, if we've got that into place where we're doing fewer things, what we want to do is look for your child to recognize their bodily sensations before the tantrum. So if you ask some kids, before you got upset about the Lego, did you feel anything in your body? And when you ask that question, some kids can actually say, yes, this is what happened, right? Some kids really do have that awareness. As soon as we ask the question, they can access that information. But some kids don't actually yet have the bodily awareness. And the reason we focus on bodily awareness is that it is far easier for us to notice a sensation in our bodies than it is for us to notice a change in our emotional state. It's far more practical, and also for some of us, because the emotion feels uncomfortable, we're actually, by default, because we're conditioned to do this, because of the way our culture treats emotions, by default, we're actually not paying attention to the emotions. We're like, nope, if I have an emotion, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm just going to focus on being happy, or I'm going to focus on what else I can do. Like, I'm going to focus on working harder, right? And so that being the case, because our minds are like, don't pay attention to that, it's much easier for us to actually notice what is the physical sensation in our bodies. Most people will feel the physical sensation of increased emotions in a limited number of spaces in their body, right? And that can just be our awareness, and it can just be how it shows up for us. So mine, I feel my emotions in this space, which is between my shoulders and the base of my neck, but to the back of my body. Those muscles are where I hold my emotions building up. Also in tension in my jaw and in my fists, right? In my hands, I should say. They become fists when I'm holding that tension. So you're looking for where are the places that your child notices it. Now, in some cases, these are things that you could know. So if you were attuned to me, you would notice as I start to hold too much emotion, my shoulders really do tense. And so you're not necessarily going to walk into a room and notice it unless you're attuned to me. But if your objective was to notice when I'm agitated emotionally, you would be able to see it. For some kids, if it's like a tension in their tummy, you may not be able to see it. But if your child displays that tension in a way that you can see it, you can like make a mental note to check in more regularly to see if you can see that emotion building up. Now, this will help your child in a couple of ways. One is that they can ask you for help before they get overwhelmed. Eventually, take some time to build the skill both to notice and the skill to ask for help, but it can be done. So that's an important piece for your child. Even just having your child notice it in themselves can help slow the 0 to 5,000 down. It will still happen, but it'll just be an incremental speed change that will help them actually get some regulation in place before they actually get overwhelmed. Now, so you want to open up, we're doing this in a number of ways. One, you're asking the question, before you got upset, did you notice? Another one is, once you've identified how does your child hold that tension, if you notice, bring it to your child's attention. If your child notices, you're going to tell them, hey, you can always ask me for help if you're starting to get upset, right? And use the words that they would use around their emotions. And then lastly, every time a tantrum happens, asking them, did you get that sensation in their tummy that you sometimes feel, right? You're building that awareness. We're just gradually becoming that it's default that we pay attention to our bodies, and if something's going on, we either do something about it or we ask for help. That's what we're building this habit around. Now, our last step is actually for you to build the skills to regulate your child's emotions when they're overwhelmed. So what we want you to be able to do is use your body language, the words you use, and your tone of voice. We want to use all of those things to help your child bring the emotion, the intensity of that emotion down. We're not wanting to calm them in the way that many people would say. What we're looking to do is to bring just the intensity down, just to a place where you can actually have a rational conversation about what is going on. So what we want to be able to do is get to a place where you can say, are you upset because I haven't been able to pay attention to you while I was cooking the dinner? Or are you upset because you really wanted to be able to build that tower and it keeps falling over, right? We want to be able to have a conversation where we're like, is this what's happening for you? And your child has a low enough intensity that they can actually process, is that what's happening for me or is it not, right? That's where we want to get to. So our job is not to remove the emotion, it's just to bring the intensity to a level where they can self-reflect and communicate about what's going on for them. Now, if this is something that you'd like some help with, some practical step-by-step, do this, then do that, then do this, and do this until this happens kind of advice, then register for my webinar, Supporting Kids Through Tantrums. In that webinar, I will take you through everything you need to know to be able to skillfully help your child regulate their emotions when they're in that really intense phase. You can register for that at jodithornton.com/tantrums, and I'll put the link for that in the show notes as well. If you have any questions at all, please do send me an email. I'll pop the link for that in the show notes as well. And I would love to hear from you if you have any clarifying questions, or if there's anything about your situation that you need a little bit more information than what I've given today. Thanks so much.